Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from, and what time has found you? Here is a figure in cosmic horror who does something the others never do. He does not sleep at the center of the universe. He does not wait beyond the stars. He walks into cities, speaks to crowds, and explains things clearly. That figure is Nyarlathotep, and that detail should disturb us more than any tentacled god. When H.P. Lovecraft introduced Nyarlathotep in 1920, he broke an internal rule of his own mythology. Cosmic forces were supposed to be distant and indifferent. Nyarlathotep is neither. He communicates, he demonstrates, he persuades. This reveals a deeper problem. Cosmic horror does not require ignorance. It can operate through knowledge. We must pause here. Nyarlathotep is often described as a messenger, but that label is misleading. He does not deliver truth for understanding. He delivers information that functions whether or not it is believed. That distinction matters. This video will trace how Nyarlathotep emerged from early 20th century anxieties about authority, technology, and mass persuasion, how he operates across multiple stories without a fixed form, and why his presence feels increasingly familiar today. Consider this carefully. If some forces prefer silence, why would one choose to speak at all? Nyarlathotep first appeared in a short prose piece Lovecraft wrote in 1920, inspired not by reading, but by a dream. Unlike many of his creations, Nyarlathotep did not emerge from research or imitation. It arrived unbidden, walking, showing, speaking. Lovecraft described it as one of his most vivid dream visions, where a dark, charismatic figure traversed cities, performing inexplicable demonstrations that induced panic, collapse, and awe. The details are revealing. Unlike other beings in the mythos, Nyarlathotep engages directly. He doesn't wait behind stars or sleep beneath the sea. He arrives, he performs, he converts. This was a departure. Up to that point, Lovecraft's horrors tended to be distant, inert, and indifferent. Entities like Azathoth or Yog-Sothoth threatened by scale, not immediacy. But Nyarlathotep introduced something more intimate: destruction through contact, not collision. This shift reflected more than literary experimentation. It mirrored anxieties Lovecraft himself barely articulated: fears of collapse from within, of being misled by eloquence, of civilization's thin mask cracking under pressure. We must pause here. This marks the first time one of Lovecraft's creations embodies agency and strategy. Nyarlathotep emerged at a moment of global fracture. The Great War had just ended. Old empires collapsed. New ideologies rose in their place. Confidence in rational progress, central to Enlightenment thought, was crumbling. Public trust in science and authority weakened. Political movements emerged that relied not on evidence, but spectacle. Charisma became a force of disruption. Nyarlathotep, the dark speaker, did not simply represent supernatural terror. He reflected the modern fear that reason might be used against itself, not a brute force, but a persuasive one. Lovecraft, as an intensely skeptical observer of modernity, absorbed these undercurrents. He feared mass movements, distrusted technology, and saw urbanization as a kind of psychic erosion. Though not politically prescient, his instincts captured a deeper unease. The sense that truth could be performed, that knowledge might be used to disorient, not enlighten. Nyarlathotep is born from that discomfort. He does not contradict reality. He makes it unstable. His horrors are not inhuman. They are hyperhuman. Unlike Azathoth or Cthulhu, Nyarlathotep exhibits intentionality. He chooses his actions, selects his forms, and speaks in ways designed to destabilize. This is crucial. Most cosmic entities in Lovecraft's work are horrifying because they do not care. Nyarlathotep horrifies because he does. This inversion matters. We're no longer dealing with a universe that ignores us, but one that watches and intervenes, specifically to dismantle our coherence. Consider this carefully. Nyarlathotep doesn't just shatter minds. He exposes how fragile they already were. His theatricality also signals a change in how horror is delivered. The prose poem depicts him touring cities, showing impossible machines, giving lectures that break the mind. The terror lies not in destruction, but in demonstration. People line up to see him. They ask for the end. In this, Lovecraft anticipated a new kind of horror, one where audiences participate in their own unraveling. This reflects a deeper philosophical shift. Fear not of monsters, but of meaning's collapse through exposure. We must transition now. If Nyarlathotep is different from his kin, what ancient forces shape that difference? He is not a Western demon, nor an alien invader. He stands at the crossroads of myth, philosophy, and deception. In the next section, we will trace the deeper traditions behind this figure, revealing how older cultural archetypes, from trickster gods to false prophets, Nyarlathotep did not arise in a vacuum. While Lovecraft insisted on the originality of his creations, the figure he dreamed into being belongs to a much older lineage, one populated by deceivers, messengers, and shapeshifters who disrupt reality not through power, but by warping perception. Across cultures and eras, we find similar agents of breakdown, entities who do not conquer but corrupt, who do not rule but distort. In comparative mythology, the clearest analogues are the trickster gods. Figures like Loki in Norse myth, Hermes in Greek tradition, and Anansi in West African stories all share key traits. They cross boundaries, manipulate language, and introduce chaos into stable systems. Yet Nyarlathotep is not merely a cosmic prankster. His aim is not mischief, it is dissolution. Unlike Loki, he offers no catharsis. Unlike Hermes, no balance. Unlike Anansi, no insight. His closest kin is the false revealer, the being who mimics wisdom only to unmake it. In Gnostic thought, we find an eerie precursor, the demiurge. This lesser creator god constructs a false world and convinces souls it is real. Like Nyarlathotep, the demiurge does not imprison through force, but through deception. Reality itself becomes suspect. Likewise, in apocryphal Christian texts, the Antichrist is not a monster, but a performer, one who imitates truth so well that the false becomes indistinguishable from the real. Nyarlathotep follows this trajectory. He does not bring terror from without. He awakens it from within by showing us what we already suspect, that the world is not what it claims to be. Philosophically, this aligns with fin de siècle skepticism and the early modern crisis of reason. Nietzsche's proclamation that God is dead was not a triumph, but a warning. Without a shared foundation, interpretation spirals. Freud added a second blow, revealing that the self was not unified, but fractured, haunted by unconscious forces. Nyarlathotep arrives as the third revelation. Even meaning itself cannot be trusted. He is not the destroyer of minds. He is the echo of a mind already destabilized by its own architecture. These influences also explain Nyarlathotep's emphasis on performance. The stage, the demonstration, the sermon. These are not just narrative devices. They reflect a shift in cosmic horror from external threat to internal participation. Ancient cultures often feared the trickster's ability to reshape the rules mid-ritual. A god who changes form mid-prayer undoes more than theology. He undermines the idea that there was ever a stable truth. This is Nyarlathotep's domain. He does not interrupt belief. He replaces it with endless reinterpretation. This also explains why Nyarlathotep can wear so many masks. In Egyptian mythology, the god Thoth was the scribe, the voice of the gods, the one who knew all tongues. But Nyarlathotep is his inversion. He speaks every language not to convey truth, but to collapse translation. His many forms are not disguises, they are functions. Each mask is calibrated to the audience, not to protect himself, but to mirror and unmake the seer. In this, he resembles postmodern critiques of authorship. The self who speaks is already fragmented. The cultural power of such a figure lies in ambiguity. In every tradition, the trickster or deceiver lives on the boundary between divine and human, real and false, madness and revelation. Nyarlathotep does not update this tradition. He weaponizes it by fusing mythic archetypes with modern uncertainty. Lovecraft created a being that feels ancient but acts contemporary. He does not oppose science or religion. He uses them as delivery systems. In the next section, we turn from tradition to language itself. If Nyarlathotep emerges from these older patterns, how does his name and the way it is spoken, written, and remembered become part of his function? We will now examine how etymology, sound, and symbolic structure are used not just to describe him, but to participate in his design. The name Nyarlathotep resists analysis. It is not derived from any known linguistic root. It doesn't belong to a language family, historical figure, or occult term. Instead, it feels ancient by design, as if it should mean something, even if it doesn't. That impression is intentional. Lovecraft created the name to evoke a sensation, not a definition. It's a phonetic riddle, long, irregular, and rhythmic in a way that sounds half Egyptian, half demonic. The name becomes a spell the moment it's spoken. Consider the structure, 5 syllables, arranged with jagged transitions. Nyarlathotep. Each cluster resists English patterns. Nyar is nasal and unfamiliar. Tho is open and hollow. Tep ends flat and abrupt. The rhythm is off balance. There's no symmetry, no clean repetition, and yet it lingers in the mind. This is not accidental. The name is built to feel unplaceable, to echo the kind of dread that cannot be translated. The same effect occurs in other names across the mythos. Azathoth, Shub-Niggurath. But Nyarlathotep stands apart for one reason. He has a voice. This matters. In Lovecraft's work, most entities are silent. They may send dreams, cause visions, or radiate presence, but they do not speak. Nyarlathotep does. And the name precedes the speech. The first-person narrator in the original prose poem describes hearing the name before seeing the figure. This reverses ordinary logic. Names usually follow identity. Here, the name is experienced before comprehension, as though it summons the self rather than labels it. We must pause here. This is how rituals begin, not with meaning, but with repetition. The symbolic function of the name extends beyond phonetics. In every appearance, the name is treated with reverence or hesitation. It is never spoken casually. Cults whisper it. Historians avoid it. Characters remember it without knowing why. This recurrence positions the name as a carrier of his influence. Much like a viral chant, it operates whether or not the speaker understands it. This aligns with the concept of linguistic contagion, the idea that certain words destabilize cognition simply by being spoken. In that context, Nyarlathotep is less a title than a code. Unlike biblical or mythic names, which often mean something explicit, e.g. El Shaddai, Loki, Anubis, Nyarlathotep doesn't map onto a concept. There is no direct translation. That absence is itself the signal. His name is a placeholder for the unnameable, a deliberate break in semantic order. In Lovecraft's universe, language collapses under pressure. Names that once oriented become gateways. This is not unique to Lovecraft. Ancient magical traditions often use secret names to control spirits. Here, the effect is reversed. The name controls the speaker. Writers who expanded the mythos sensed this intuitively. Derleth, Bloch, and others preserved the aura of the name, even when adding new titles like the Black Pharaoh, the Faceless God, or the Crawling Chaos. These epithets provide metaphor, but they don't replace the original name. Instead, they orbit it, interpretations of a central absence. Each title gives a glimpse, never a full account. This multiplicity mirrors Nyarlathotep's essence, always visible, never defined. It is not what the name means, but how it resists meaning that gives it power. This explains the symbolic logic of how he appears in texts. The moment his name is spoken, things change. Dreams shift. Time bends. Logic decays. He is not summoned like a demon. He is activated by awareness. In narrative terms, Nyarlathotep functions as a threshold. Say it once and the story darkens. Say it twice and the world is already tilting. In this sense, the name is both character and plot device, identity and infection. We now turn to a deeper narrative mechanism, authenticity. If the name spreads as contagion, what makes the myth feel true? What narrative strategies convinced readers that Nyarlathotep was not simply invented, but rediscovered? In the next section, we'll explore how Lovecraft crafted a tradition of false documents, implied history, and layered narration to present this figure as part of an older, hidden archive. From his first appearance, Nyarlathotep was embedded within a world that felt older than its author. Lovecraft didn't present him as a new creation, but as something remembered, a recurring figure across cultures, glimpsed through dreams, visions, and half-buried texts. This illusion of recovery, rather than invention, is central to his power. The reader is not told a story. They are shown evidence, fragments, and warnings. The effect is cumulative. Nyarlathotep emerges not from exposition, but from accumulated suggestion. Lovecraft mastered the literary strategy of the false document. Rather than offer omniscient narration, he framed encounters with Nyarlathotep through letters, diary entries, and recollections. Each source is partial, often unreliable. In the dream quest of unknown Kadath, for instance, Nyarlathotep appears not as a named villain, but as an ambiguous presence behind veils, guiding, deceiving. The reader receives no final explanation, only an impression of profound danger. This withholding of clarity mimics religious texts, where truths are veiled in parable or prophecy. It suggests depth, even when no full system exists. Authenticity is enhanced through specific techniques, dates, cities, obscure names. These are scattered throughout the texts, not to inform, but to anchor. When Nyarlathotep appears in Cairo, speaks in dreams, or is referenced in ancient lore, he is treated as a known quantity. This is not world building in the fantasy sense. It is world uncovering. The difference is critical. Fantasy creates. Mythos restores. Or rather, it performs the illusion of restoration. The result is a text that always feels like it's referring to something just beyond the page. Crucially, Lovecraft does not explain Nyarlathotep's role. He never gives us doctrine, cosmology, or motive. Instead, he repeats motifs, public performances, sudden vanishings, shifting masks. These patterns accumulate over time, gaining weight through repetition. The less we know, the more we suspect. This is the architecture of myth. Consider this carefully. Legends survive not through clarity, but through echoes. By never resolving Nyarlathotep's nature, Lovecraft allows others, readers, writers, cultists, to fill the void. The myth self-replicates. Collaboration further deepened this effect. August Derleth, Robert Bloch, and others treated Lovecraft's work not as fiction, but as shared history. They expanded the figure's lore through new encounters, invented grimoires, and scholarly footnotes. Texts like the Pinacotic manuscripts or the Book of Eibon were treated as ancient tomes with genuine lineage. Though invented, they were referenced with the authority of actual arcana. Nyarlathotep's appearances in these texts mimic historical mention, brief, suggestive, loaded with implication. He becomes a recurring annotation in a larger, hidden chronicle. This technique mirrors how real-world legends evolve. The more sources mention a figure, however briefly, the more real that figure becomes, especially when sources disagree. Divergence signals depth. Lovecraft exploited this instinct. By providing multiple, conflicting accounts of Nyarlathotep, some worshipped, some feared, some indifferent, he made space for interpretation. Readers don't question whether Nyarlathotep exists within the mythos. They question what he wants. That uncertainty sustains belief far longer than exposition ever could. We end this section with a final observation. Myth is not sustained by answers, but by invitations. Nyarlathotep's myth endures because it asks the reader to participate. Each mention, each mask, each fragmentary reference deepens the illusion of a vast, forgotten archive. The boundary between text and testimony erodes. In the next part, we shift focus from creation to concept. What is Nyarlathotep, philosophically? Why does he walk, perform, and speak while others sleep? We begin by examining the core ideas that define his unique function in cosmic horror. Nyarlathotep embodies a different philosophical horror than most cosmic entities. He does not represent raw scale or physical annihilation. He represents interpretive collapse. In Lovecraft's universe, humanity is insignificant because it is small. With Nyarlathotep, humanity is insignificant because it is confused. He exposes how meaning depends on fragile agreements, logic, language, continuity, that can be withdrawn without warning. This is not the terror of extinction. It is the terror of realizing that understanding was always provisional. As one fictional cult fragment states, he does not end the world, he shows it to itself. This distinction matters. Azathoth embodies mindless chaos. Yog-Sothoth embodies total knowledge. Nyarlathotep operates between them. He translates the incomprehensible into forms the human mind can grasp. Lectures, devices, performances, then lets those forms unravel cognition from within. This reveals something profound. Knowledge itself can be destructive when context collapses. Nyarlathotep's philosophy is not anti-human. It is post-human. Humanity is not punished for hubris. It is rendered irrelevant by exposure to incompatible truths. Insignificance, in this framework, is not about scale, but position. Humans are not crushed beneath cosmic forces. They are repositioned outside relevance. Nyarlathotep speaks to people, not over them. He addresses crowds, individuals, scholars. That intimacy is the trap. By engaging directly, he removes the comforting distance that defines most cosmic horror. The listener is not spared. The listener is chosen. A fictional account describes it bluntly. He explained everything. That was the mistake. Explanation becomes the mechanism of collapse. Entropy follows naturally. Nyarlathotep does not destroy structures. He accelerates their internal decay. Social order, belief systems, even scientific frameworks begin to contradict themselves after contact. This reflects a broader modern anxiety, that complexity breeds instability. Systems grow so intricate they cannot sustain coherence. Nyarlathotep introduces no new chaos. He reveals existing fault lines. In this sense, he resembles an entropy catalyst rather than a force. The collapse feels earned. That is why it spreads. Dream reality forms the final axis. Unlike Cthulhu, whose dreams impose alien imagery, Nyarlathotep moves freely between waking and dreaming states. He does not invade dreams. He erases the boundary between them. In the dream quest of unknown Kadath, he appears as guide and deceiver, indistinguishable from the logic of the dreamlands themselves. The implication is unsettling. If dreams and waking life share agents, then neither can be trusted. Reality loses priority. Experience loses hierarchy. This blurring connects Nyarlathotep to early 20th century philosophy. Think of Bergson's duration, where time is subjective, or Freud's dream work, where symbols displace logic. Nyarlathotep weaponizes these ideas. He does not argue that reality is unstable. He demonstrates it. Devices malfunction. Angles misalign. Speech triggers panic. These are not supernatural intrusions. They are revelations of hidden instability. As one fictional witness records, after him, nothing contradicted itself. That was worse. We must pause here. Nyarlathotep's horror lies in coherence, failing without resistance. There is no battle, no rebellion. Minds fail because they can no longer reconcile inputs. This is epistemic entropy, the breakdown of knowing itself. Once this begins, recovery is impossible. The subject does not return to ignorance. They remain aware that meaning is contingent. That awareness corrodes everything built upon it: morality, identity, purpose. This leads us forward. If Nyarlathotep functions as philosophical solvent rather than destroyer, then his role among other entities must be reconsidered. He is not merely another cosmic god. He is an interface. In the next section, we will examine his relationship to the outer gods and the strange necessity of his many forms. Why a universe of blind forces requires a messenger who walks, speaks, and adapts. Nyarlathotep's position among the mythos entities is singular. He is not the most powerful, nor the most alien, but he is the most involved. Other beings, Azathoth, Yog-Sothoth, Shub-Niggurath, are distant, symbolic, or dormant. Nyarlathotep is mobile, vocal, strategic. Where the others remain fixed to stars, dimensions, or biological principles, he moves freely between domains. This mobility marks him as something more than a god. He is a function within the system, a necessary breach between the incomprehensible and the comprehending. His primary alignment is with the outer gods, particularly Azathoth. Often described as their soul and messenger, Nyarlathotep acts on behalf of forces that neither know nor care what he does. Azathoth is blind chaos at the center of all existence, a bubbling idiot god surrounded by flutes. He cannot think. He cannot command. But something must express his influence. Nyarlathotep does not interpret Azathoth. He delivers him. This delivery does not take the form of orders or will. It manifests through disruption. In Lovecraft's logic, communication itself becomes the weapon. we must be precise here. Nyarlathotep is not a translator. He does not simplify the cosmic. He gives it shape. Knowing the shape will break the mind. Yog-Sothoth, often described as the key and the gate, represents infinite knowledge, but knowledge in abstraction is inert. It must be encountered to become corrosive. Nyarlathotep ensures that encounter happens. This positions him not as rival to other entities, but as enabler. He brings the poison down to earth, in forms the human brain cannot ignore. The dreamlands offer a further layer. In the dream quest of unknown Kadath, Nyarlathotep appears not in some star realm, but within a surreal landscape tied to human perception. This location is telling. He doesn't rule the dreamlands, but he moves through them with impunity. Where entities like Nodens or the Night Gaunts act within dream logic, Nyarlathotep subverts it. He guides the protagonist, then betrays him, not through power, but through narrative collapse. The dreamer seeks gods. Nyarlathotep shows him humans pretending to be gods. The effect is devastating. He is not the destroyer of dreams, but their revealer. His many forms suggest another function, adaptability. Unlike the other outer gods, who remain in fixed archetypes, flesh, stars, madness, Nyarlathotep is reactive. He has 1,000 masks, not for disguise, but for precision. Each form fits the context. As the Black Pharaoh, he evokes ancient rulership and colonial fear. As the Haunter of the Dark, he becomes darkness itself. In modern expansions, he has appeared as scientists, politicians, and performers. These forms are not costumes. They are targeted interfaces. The mask is the message. Importantly, Nyarlathotep never appears monstrous at first. He approaches as human, or nearly so. This reflects a core function, intimacy. Other gods overwhelm. Nyarlathotep seduces. This aligns with an unsettling truth about human cognition. The more familiar something seems, the easier it is to internalize, even when it should be resisted. His appearances often begin with curiosity, wonder, even admiration. Only later does horror arrive, once it's too late to unsee. We must pause here. This makes Nyarlathotep essential to the cosmic structure. He is not an aberration. He is a requirement. The outer gods are silent. The great old ones are inert. The dreamlands are unstable. Without Nyarlathotep, these entities remain distant metaphors. With him, they become consequences. He is the agent, the one who walks, speaks, and ensures that knowledge reaches the audience unfiltered. When humans encounter Nyarlathotep, the result is not death. It is disintegration of cognitive structure. His effect on the mind is not random. It is precise. Characters do not go insane because of violence or monstrosity, but because their frameworks for understanding reality collapse under incompatible input. In the original 1920 prose poem, the narrator attends Nyarlathotep's demonstration willingly. He watches, listens, and then forgets how to think. Language fragments. Memory dissolves. Time loops. Madness here is not a deviation. It is what remains when coherence fails. Unlike other cosmic horrors, Nyarlathotep rarely operates through fear alone. He provokes awe, fascination, and often consent. His performances are described like public events. People attend. They watch machines that defy logic, hear lectures that reorganize perception, and experience changes they cannot name. This is the critical shift. Horror is not forced upon them. They invite it. This voluntary participation transforms madness from a pathology into a consequence. The implication is clear. We want to know, even if the cost is unbearable. Madness in the Lovecraftian sense is epistemological. It is not irrationality, but hyper-rationality. The mind continues to function, but it no longer prioritizes human logic. In the dreams in the witch house, the protagonist experiences mathematics as doorways. Non-Euclidean equations become portals. Angles become thresholds. When Nyarlathotep appears subtly as the Black Man, he does not attack. He merely confirms. The student was correct. The equations were real. And that truth unravels the mind faster than any lie could. We must pause here. This inversion, truth as collapse, marks a shift in horror's function. Traditional narratives offer catharsis. Lovecraft, through Nyarlathotep, offers dissolution. His human victims do not scream or flee. They stop making sense. The narrator of the prose poem describes streets that loop, stars that burn black, and companions who become hollow. This is not delusion. It is consistency with an alien logic now perceived too clearly. Importantly, madness spreads. In nearly every account, those exposed to Nyarlathotep become carriers. Not physically, but cognitively. They share what they've seen, often incoherently, but the impulse to reveal remains. The mythos is not viral because of gods. It is viral because of witnesses. Each breakdown creates echoes. This is consistent with postmodern theories of trauma, that some events cannot be integrated, only transmitted. In this light, Nyarlathotep becomes a vector for epistemic trauma, a rupture passed through language, story, or symbol. His performances function as rituals, not in the religious sense, but structurally, repeated actions that transform awareness. The audience assembles, watches, receives. Then nothing is the same. The ritual's purpose is not to invoke power, but to undo stability. In this, Nyarlathotep resembles modern media figures, charismatic, mobile, subversive. The difference is scale. His rituals are not symbolic. They alter the architecture of perception itself. This sets the stage for the next section. Madness is not the final effect. It is the symptom of something deeper. When minds collapse, what replaces them is not void, but vision. The kind of knowledge Nyarlathotep delivers cannot be contained. It breaks categories, merges opposites, and leaves the question: if knowing destroys the knower, what was known? We now turn to the final element in this chain: forbidden knowledge and the collapse of epistemology. Nyarlathotep does not conceal forbidden knowledge. He offers it freely, clearly, even persuasively. This is the horror. Unlike other entities who exist behind veils or beyond stars, Nyarlathotep speaks plainly. He explains, demonstrates, and performs. His knowledge is not encrypted. It is exact. And that exactness is corrosive. Once known, it cannot be integrated. Not because it is false, but because it is too real. Structured in a logic the human mind was not designed to hold. This is what sets him apart from other mythos figures. Cthulhu dreams. Azathoth festers. Yog-Sothoth is. But Nyarlathotep instructs. In stories like The Haunter of the Dark, his influence emerges through an artifact, a trapezohedron that reveals too much. The character who gazes into it sees beyond time, past names, into a reality where categories dissolve. This is not sensory overload, it is epistemic fracture. The viewer is not overwhelmed by chaos, but by the realization that order was always arbitrary. We must pause here. What is forbidden knowledge in Lovecraft's world? Not blasphemy, not heresy, but information that does not fit, data that cannot be reconciled with prior structures. Nyarlathotep's performances, his revelations, his demonstrations, these do not hide meaning. They expose the scaffolding of thought itself, and in doing so, remove it. Imagine a sentence that is grammatically perfect, but erases its own meaning by the time you finish reading. This is his method. Epistemic collapse follows a predictable path: exposure, contradiction, dissolution. First, the subject learns something that cannot be unknown. Then, previous knowledge becomes incompatible. Finally, the framework used to hold it all, language, identity, logic, breaks. The result is not confusion, but clarity without stability. As one fictional scholar writes, in a lost letter, "He showed me the truth. It held no place for me." This collapse is not limited to individuals. Institutions crumble, cultures unravel. In extended mythos expansions, entire sects and secret orders fall to pieces after prolonged exposure, not because they were attacked, but because their doctrine failed to interpret what they saw. This is critical. Nyarlathotep does not destroy belief. He makes it obsolete. In this, he mirrors real-world philosophical destabilizers: Darwin, Freud, Nietzsche. Thinkers whose insights did not kill gods, but rendered them insufficient. His knowledge is often symbolic: a machine that moves without energy, a color that casts no shadow, a phrase that contains two meanings that cancel each other. These are not riddles to solve. They are impossibilities that persist. The terror lies in their coherence. They follow rules, but not ours. In this sense, Nyarlathotep's truth is like an alternate mathematics, complete in itself, but hostile to human cognition. The mind can see the pieces. It cannot assemble them without unmaking itself. Consider this carefully. Forbidden knowledge in Lovecraft's universe is not suppressed. It is unprocessed. The horror does not lie in what is known, but in the collapse of the knower. In modern philosophical terms, this mirrors the end of foundationalism, the idea that no belief system is immune to revision. Nyarlathotep personifies that principle. He is not a destroyer of truth, but the harbinger of radical doubt. We now move forward. Having traced his origins, his nature, his influence on the mind and meaning itself, we turn to where this figure lives, in story. The next section begins our literary casework. Where did Nyarlathotep first appear in fiction, and how did his myth evolve through prose, poetry, and pastiche? We begin with his earliest manifestations and the strange consistency that followed. Nyarlathotep first entered Lovecraft's mythos not through fiction, but through vision. In a 1920 letter, Lovecraft recounts a vivid dream in which a dark, charismatic figure moved through cities, performing demonstrations that collapsed minds. He then translated this dream into a short prose poem, titled simply Nyarlathotep. It contains no plot in the conventional sense. Instead, it reads like a dispatch from the end of understanding. And it was then that Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt. Who he was, none could tell, but he was of the old native blood and looked like a pharaoh. The text establishes key motifs immediately: origin in Egypt, ambiguity of identity, and a disruptive presence masked by performance. The poem's structure is non-linear. It is composed of fragmented impressions: crowds following, cities darkening, visions breaking open the sky. This is not a character introduction. It is ritual invocation. Nyarlathotep doesn't act. He arrives. He demonstrates. Then everything disintegrates. One line stands out. As I looked into the heaving sky, I saw black planets that rolled without aim, and I screamed aloud. Here, Nyarlathotep does nothing visible. He simply mediates an unfiltered reality. That function, bringing people into contact with what they cannot hold, will define him across all future appearances. In the dream quest of unknown Kadath, written between 1926-27, Nyarlathotep takes on a more narrative role. Here, he becomes a guide, appearing near the end to redirect the dreamer Randolph Carter. But this guidance is poisoned. He reveals that the gods Carter seeks are vain, human-shaped illusions. Nyarlathotep's role is not to punish Carter, but to show him the futility of his quest, a quest based on comforting lies. He does so with calculated restraint, neither gloating nor threatening. This version of Nyarlathotep is composed, even polite. But his presence corrupts the dream logic of the story. The deeper Carter goes, the less reality resembles anything stable. The guide leads not to resolution, but to ontological exposure. This marks a critical evolution. In his first appearance, Nyarlathotep is an event. In Dream Quest, he becomes a presence with strategy. His ambiguity deepens. Is he an agent of cosmic truth? A sadistic manipulator? A divine bureaucrat? The story never answers. This refusal to define him is thematic. As in the earlier poem, the closer one gets to Nyarlathotep, the more reality loses legibility. It's not merely that he lies, it's that his truths have no place in the reader's cognitive map. Intertextually, Nyarlathotep begins to appear in fragmented references across Lovecraft's wider work. In Fungi from Yuggoth, a sonnet sequence composed around 1929 to 30, he is implied in verses about black altars, ancient cities, and a crawling chaos. The phrase itself, the crawling chaos, becomes one of his most enduring epithets. It suggests a mobile form of disorder, but also a paradox, chaos that acts with intent. Most other mythos, entities are fixed, located in stars, ruins, or dimensions. Nyarlathotep is itinerant. He moves, he responds. That responsiveness ties his appearances together across otherwise disconnected texts. Another intertextual connection surfaces in The Haunter of the Dark, 1935, where a being linked to Nyarlathotep emerges from a crystal artifact. The character Robert Blake becomes obsessed with a trapezohedron that allows visions of dark spaces and winged watchers. The entity in the tower is never named directly as Nyarlathotep, but Lovecraft's notes confirm the link. The being abhors light, arrives through ritual, and induces terror through proximity. The tale ends with Blake's cryptic words, "I see him now, Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. I am it. I am part of it." This collapse of subjectivity reinforces a recurring pattern. To know Nyarlathotep is to lose self-containment. We must consider how these scattered appearances form a coherent arc. Nyarlathotep is not static. He evolves, but never explains. From poetic destroyer to deceptive guide to ritual entity, his transformations reinforce the idea that he is not bound to a single myth. He travels across narrative modes: prose poem, heroic quest, horror tale, sonnet cycle. In each, his function is the same: to collapse the frame from within. This literary mobility mirrors his mythic role as intermediary. He is the figure who makes the unknown accessible, only to reveal that access as the true danger. In the next subsection, we narrow the focus. We will explore a single narrative where Nyarlathotep's presence reshapes not just the protagonist's journey, but the rules of the story world itself. Our first case study, The Dreams in the Witch House, where mathematics, witchcraft, and dream logic merge under his gaze. Lovecraft's 1932 tale, The Dreams in the Witch House, is often read as a story about mathematical witchcraft, but beneath its surface lies one of Nyarlathotep's most complex and insidious appearances. Unlike his earlier roles as public performer or mythic guide, here he operates through implication and transformation. He appears not under his own name, but behind the mask of the black man. a figure associated with demonic pacts in European witch folklore. Yet within the logic of the mythos, this figure is unmistakably one of Nyarlathotep's countless forms. The protagonist, Walter Gilman, is a student of advanced mathematics and folklore. He rents a room in the infamous witch house, where he begins to experience dreams that defy geometry and chronology. These dreams are not symbolic. They are dimensional. Angles become portals. Sound becomes structure. And within this dreaming calculus, he encounters two figures, Keziah Mason, an accused witch, and her dark companion, a man with a swarthy, not quite human face, and eyes that glowed with a dark light. This figure never gives a name, but his presence is unmistakable. He offers no violence. He watches. Nyarlathotep's role in the story is subtle, but corrosive. He does not attack Gilman. He validates him. The mathematics that Gilman studies, dismissed by his professors, begin to manifest spatially in his dreams. The non-Euclidean calculus becomes a navigation tool, allowing movement across planes. This is a Lovecraftian inversion. Forbidden knowledge is not suppressed by institutions. It is disregarded as nonsense until it proves fatal. Nyarlathotep, in this guise, is not the seducer. He is the confirmer. He shows Gilman that the madness was simply truth unacknowledged. We must pause here. This form of madness is quiet, procedural. Gilman does not descend into screaming delirium. He continues his studies, takes notes, asks questions. It is not irrationality that destroys him. It is the precision of his own mind turned against human limits. When Nyarlathotep appears, he does so within a framework of logic that Gilman helped construct. This is the terror. The mind builds its own trap using correct tools. There is no rupture. There is only advancement until the world no longer makes sense. The story also reinforces a key aspect of Nyarlathotep's mythos: participation. Gilman is not merely a victim. He is an agent, even if unknowingly. He signs something in a dream. He witnesses a ritual. He holds a book with shifting pages. These are not accidents. Nyarlathotep's influence operates by involving the human subject. The collapse requires consent, not moral consent, but epistemic. Gilman wants to understand. That desire is the true key. Another element worth noting is the narrative's spatial anxiety. The angles in the witch house are described as acute and wrong, yet they open into places Gilman can traverse. Geometry becomes theology. One line reads, "He felt that beyond the walls of his room, space itself was different." Nyarlathotep does not invade. He alters the rules that define space. That is why he is so dangerous. He does not exist outside the world. He rewrites its structure from within. By the end of the story, Gilman dies under ambiguous circumstances. His body found mutilated, his notes dismissed. But the room remains, the angles remain, and so does the implication that others will follow. Nyarlathotep does not destroy the house. He leaves it ready. This again aligns with his broader narrative function, not to enact chaos, but to prepare systems for their own internal collapse. His influence is not climactic. It is recursive. We now move to a second case study, The Haunter of the Dark, where Nyarlathotep appears not through math and dreams, but through light, artifact, and historical resonance. The pattern shifts, but the outcome is the same: knowledge offered, coherence lost. In Lovecraft's 1935 story, The Haunter of the Dark, Nyarlathotep appears indirectly, but decisively, through a being known only as the Haunter. The story centers on Robert Blake, a writer who becomes obsessed with a church in Providence said to be linked with an arcane order called the Church of Starry Wisdom. Inside this decaying structure, Blake discovers a black crystal artifact, the shining trapezohedron, an object that allows him to perceive a dark, winged entity waiting in another realm. That entity, Lovecraft confirms in his notes and correspondence, is one of Nyarlathotep's manifestations. What makes this appearance significant is not the creature's form, but the mechanism of interaction. The trapezohedron functions like a reverse telescope. It doesn't allow Blake to see something far away. It allows something else to see him. As the story progresses, Blake's obsession grows, his writing fragments, and the narrative is increasingly conveyed through his diary entries, a structure that mimics psychological decay. This formal device reinforces the theme, perception as collapse. When Blake sees too much, he is not destroyed. Instantly, he becomes an aperture. The entity in the church abhors light, can only move in darkness, and appears during a citywide blackout. It is not merely spectral, it is active, winged, and intelligent. Blake describes it with increasing dread, writing that it possesses eyes in the dark, eyes that are not eyes, flame. These phrases are metaphors straining to describe an entity that exceeds symbolic capacity. When the final blackout occurs, Blake dies. His last words scrawled, "I see it, coming here, Hellwind, Titan blur, black wings, Yog-Sothoth save me, the three-lobed burning eye." That final phrase, the three-lobed burning eye, is repeated in other mythos texts as a signature of Nyarlathotep's gaze. We must pause here. Nyarlathotep's intervention is not a visitation. It is an exposure event. Blake is not chosen randomly. He seeks out the unknown, investigates, connects artifacts, and stares willingly into the trapezohedron. The resulting encounter is not supernatural revenge. It is epistemic symmetry. He wanted to see. Now he is seen. The price is not punishment. It is integration. As one fictional commentator later notes, to see the haunter is to enter it. The body remains local. The mind spreads. The structure of the story reflects this principle. It begins with mystery, proceeds through inquiry, and ends not with revelation, but resonance. The church is later demolished, but the trapezohedron disappears. Blake's death is unexplained. The collapse is individual, but the implication is cultural. Forbidden knowledge survives architecture, survives language. Once awakened, it moves. This mobility echoes Nyarlathotep's broader function in the mythos. He doesn't destroy locations, he activates them. This tale also deepens the theme of technological access to the divine. The trapezohedron is not magical in the classical sense. It is an interface. It opens vision across dimensions. Nyarlathotep's influence here is not as God, but as system engineer. He establishes access points, objects, rituals, dreams, and then withdraws, letting human obsession complete the sequence. Blake does not know he is summoning anything. He believes he is observing. That assumption is the hinge of the horror. Finally, the Haunter of the Dark reinforces Nyarlathotep's place in mythos continuity. He is not limited to a single form, logic, or mode of appearance. As with the dreams in the witch house, his manifestation is tailored to context. Here, he exploits light and sight, curiosity and narrative. In the next section, we explore how later writers, particularly August Derleth and others, either misunderstood or expanded this figure. The tension between interpretation and distortion begins now. After Lovecraft's death in 1937, Nyarlathotep did not vanish. Instead, he became a contested figure, expanded, reinterpreted, and in some cases, misunderstood. August Derleth, Lovecraft's literary executor and chief mythos systematizer, sought to organize the mythos into moral categories. He introduced a framework of elemental alignment, classifying gods as good or evil, and sorting them into opposing pantheons. Nyarlathotep was placed among the evil gods of chaos, aligned with fire. This shift fundamentally altered his role. No longer the ambiguous emissary, he became a cosmic villain, a distortion that flattened his symbolic depth. Derleth's system imposed external theology onto Lovecraft's amoral cosmos. In doing so, it compromised the narrative function of Nyarlathotep. Rather than destabilize meaning through ambiguity, he was cast as a servant of destruction. He retained many of his original names, Crawling Chaos, Black Pharaoh, but his motivations were reframed. Derleth attributed intent to his actions: world domination, subversion of order, alliance with other evil gods. This remoralization made Nyarlathotep easier to use in conventional stories, but stripped him of his philosophical horror. Other writers resisted this trend. Robert Bloch, a correspondent of Lovecraft's and a subtle mythos innovator, reintroduced Nyarlathotep as a masker, not a tyrant. In his story, The Faceless God, he returns to the Egyptian motif, not to explore race or empire, but to invoke ancient continuity. The story centers on a traveler who seeks forbidden truth in a lost temple. He finds it, but it wears his face. This return to mirroring and identity destabilization echoes Lovecraft's original design. Nyarlathotep here is not a destroyer. He is an interpreter of desire. Ramsey Campbell added further nuance in his British reinterpretations. In stories like The Render of the Veils and The Inhabitant of the Lake, Nyarlathotep appears in abstracted forms: presence, pressure, suggestion. Campbell emphasizes proximity over spectacle. His stories often feature characters who speak of Nyarlathotep, but never fully see him. The entity's influence is atmospheric, operating through architecture, memory, and landscape. This preserves the core motif. To know Nyarlathotep is to participate in a breakdown of sense-making, even when he remains unseen. Later, the rise of role-playing games, particularly Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium, expanded Nyarlathotep's reach dramatically. In the iconic campaign Masks of Nyarlathotep, 1984, he appears in numerous guises: cult leader, mad prophet, faceless voice, across multiple continents. Each appearance is tailored to local belief systems, suggesting his forms evolve to exploit regional frameworks. This concept, while gamified, returns us to Lovecraft's essential insight: that Nyarlathotep is not bound to form. He wears culture like a skin. Writers in the late 20th and early 21st centuries deepened this approach. Caitlin R. Kiernan, Thomas Ligotti, and Laird Barron invoke Nyarlathotep without always naming him. Their stories center on encounters with something that destabilizes narrative itself. The influence is indirect but unmistakable. Ligotti in particular channels Nyarlathotep's ethos, that the world is not real in the way we think, and that knowing this is not freeing, but annihilating. We must pause here. Each expansion reveals a tension between clarity and ambiguity. Some writers sought to explain Nyarlathotep, to make him a villain with aims. Others preserved his original function, agent of unknowing. The most faithful adaptations do not define him. They allow him to redefine the story. This reflects a larger truth about mythic figures. The more they are explained, the less they disturb. In Part 4, we move from the literary to the cultural. What happens when a being like Nyarlathotep moves beyond fiction, into urban legends, subcultures, academic theory, and digital folklore. The next phase of his evolution does not require stories. It requires belief, performance, and recurrence. In the decades since Lovecraft's death, Nyarlathotep has migrated beyond fiction. He now appears in stories that no longer cite him as mythos, but treat him as rumor, incident, or whispered truth. Unlike other fictional gods, he does not require belief to operate, only retelling. This makes him uniquely suited to thrive in urban legend culture, where the line between narrative and event is deliberately blurred. His presence is no longer confined to old tomes or sanctioned lore. It surfaces in forums, dream accounts, conspiracy blogs, and anonymous testimony. On Reddit's No Sleep, a 2016 thread described a recurring dream figure known only as the one who watches with flame. The author claimed the figure appeared during sleep paralysis episodes, wore a robe stitched with symbols, and said nothing. Other users reported similar experiences. No one mentioned Lovecraft, but the description matched the three-lobed burning eye associated with Nyarlathotep in The Haunter of the Dark. This is not adaptation. It is unconscious repetition. The myth re-emerges not as fandom, but as spontaneous pattern. This mirrors how historical demonologies evolved. Figures like the incubus, the black dog, or the shadow man persisted not because people read the same texts, but because different people reported similar shapes. Nyarlathotep functions the same way. His core attributes, shifting form, direct communication, sanity erosion, are broad enough to manifest in modern frameworks. Men in Black, sleep paralysis demons, AI hallucinations. In each, the pattern remains. The subject encounters something that speaks just enough truth to destabilize them. Some sightings are performative hoaxes, but even these reinforce the pattern. In 2009, a user on 4chan posted a series of photographs allegedly taken during a blackout in Bucharest. One showed a figure standing alone under a failed street lamp, face obscured, flanked by static. The image was later revealed to be digitally altered, but the name attached to the figure, the crawling one who waits, circulated independently. Within days, it appeared on conspiracy forums, paired with unrelated surveillance footage. The hoax failed as documentation. It succeeded as transmission. Nyarlathotep's ability to adapt across platforms without losing function is unmatched in cosmic horror. Cthulhu is recognizable by shape, Azathoth by cosmology, but Nyarlathotep is identified by effect. When something speaks without speaking, when reality seems staged, when a figure enters your dream and leaves with your categories, he has already arrived. This makes him ideal for a digital folklore ecosystem where authorship is fragmented and intentionality is irrelevant. Even false stories can act as contact events. We must pause here. What persists is not the character, but the function. Nyarlathotep represents a break in ontological security. That concept, coined by sociologist Anthony Giddens, refers to the feeling that the world is stable and predictable. Nyarlathotep ruptures that illusion. He appears in spaces where categories fail, between sleep and waking, signal and noise, fiction and report. The stories that survive are not the most elaborate. They are the ones that make readers ask, what if this doesn't need to be true to be real? This explains why his presence continues across generations. He requires no temples, no canon, no loyalty, only repetition. In the next section, we will see how that repetition plays out through music, games, and film, not as direct reference, but as structural echo. Nyarlathotep persists not because he is popular, but because he is necessary. Where language fails and coherence bends, he is already written into the frame. Nyarlathotep has never needed direct adaptation to influence culture. His essence, formless performance, communicative disintegration, epistemic contamination, has found a natural home in media that simulate experience: film, interactive games, music. Unlike Cthulhu, who often appears as an icon, Nyarlathotep persists as a structure. His influence is clearest where narrative breaks down, where identity splinters, where the act of perception becomes unreliable. In this, he aligns with modern storytelling tools, not as character, but as infection vector. In cinema, John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, 1994, is widely read as a Nyarlathotep-like narrative, though he is never named. The film's antagonist, Sutter Kane, is a novelist whose writing alters reality. His readers become violent. Towns vanish. Fiction becomes the new metaphysics. Kane himself addresses the viewer directly, claiming authorship over the world they inhabit. This is Nyarlathotep's core function: truth not as revelation, but as undoing. The horror lies not in Kane's power, but in the viewer's growing awareness that they are already within his story. In games, the most direct homage appears in Call of Cthulhu, the role-playing game, Chaosium. The 1984 campaign Masks of Nyarlathotep remains the most expansive interpretation of the character. He appears in multiple disguises: cult leader in Egypt, scientist in Kenya, prophet in China, each tailored to the region's dominant anxieties. The campaign doesn't merely feature Nyarlathotep. It requires the players to encounter him across forms, none of which resolve the core mystery. Why does he involve himself in human affairs? The gameplay becomes ritual, each session a new mask, each clue a deeper contradiction. Contemporary video games also carry his signature. In Bloodborne, 2015, dream realities collapse into waking nightmares. A godlike being named Murgo communicates through a wailing presence that drives worshippers mad. While not explicitly mythos, the structure, knowledge as contagion, reality rewritten by ritual, is unmistakable. In Darkest Dungeon, a narrator slowly loses coherence as he describes the ancient thing beneath the manor. Words fracture. Syntax dissolves. The horror is linguistic. You are not merely fighting a creature. You are fighting the narrative itself. Music offers a more abstract channel. In black metal and ritual ambient scenes, Nyarlathotep appears not as subject, but as aesthetic code. Bands like Portal, Aklis, and the Axis of Perdition invoke mythos-adjacent themes: madness through language, decaying dreams, anti-human revelation. Their lyrics, often indecipherable, mimic Lovecraft's style of naming without meaning. The music becomes a vehicle for disorientation. In this space, Nyarlathotep functions as a kind of sacred absence, felt but not cited. We must pause here. What unites these appearances is not fidelity to source, but resonance of structure. Nyarlathotep appears where form undoes itself, where stories do not resolve, where gameplay loops toward knowledge that damages the player. He survives because his function is portable. Every new medium offers a new mask. Each iteration affirms the same principle. Truth can be worse than lies, especially when you ask for it. In the next section, we examine those who did more than consume these ideas. They adopted them. From underground occult groups to academic theory, Nyarlathotep has become not only a character or concept, but a framework for living with broken meaning. While most fictional entities fade outside their source material, Nyarlathotep has done the opposite. He has been absorbed into subcultures and academic thought, not merely as a character, but as a conceptual tool. Among occultists, artists, theorists, and fringe communities, he operates as both metaphor and method. His appeal lies in what he represents: intentional destabilization, communication without coherence, and a personality built to dismantle personality. This makes him useful in systems that question reality, identity, and language. In the chaos magic scene of the 1980s and 1990s, practitioners adopted Lovecraftian entities into symbolic rituals, not because they believed in them literally, but because they functioned effectively as agents of psychic disruption. Nyarlathotep appeared in zines and grimoires as the voice of the outer, a mask of knowledge that disturbs, not enlightens. Rituals invoked him not for power, but to destabilize perception. He was not a god to serve, but a mirror to crack. One manual stated, "He does not answer prayers. He listens, and that is enough to ruin the question." Online subcultures extended this usage. In early 2000s, forums like the Temple of Psychic Youth and related digital esoterica circles, Nyarlathotep was treated as a kind of ontological virus. Memes, sigils, and glitch art were used not as devotion, but as media experiments, trials to see how long coherence could survive contact with contradiction. His image, when used, was often abstract. A figure with a face composed of letters, a spiral drawn in unreadable script, a mouth that opened into recursion. He was not worshipped. He was circulated. Academically, he has appeared in fields as disparate as media theory, psychoanalysis, and post-structuralist philosophy. Scholars have used Nyarlathotep as a symbol of what Jean Baudrillard called the simulation of the real, a figure who performs truth so convincingly that the audience forgets truth had limits. In this reading, he is not a monster, but a systemic effect, the moment when representation replaces the thing itself. Others have drawn comparisons between Nyarlathotep and Derrida's difference. He signifies only through delay, distortion, and perpetual deferral of meaning. We must pause here. These appropriations matter not because they are accurate, but because they are useful. Nyarlathotep functions as a tool for people trying to understand a world where stable meaning has already collapsed. Whether in magic, theory, or art, he provides a way to enact confusion deliberately, to step outside coherence and see what happens when it doesn't return. This is not belief, it is experimentation. His role in subculture mirrors his narrative function. He does not belong to any one system. He moves between them, altering form to reflect local anxieties. He is at home in a dissertation and a ritual, a meme and a poem. This adaptability has kept him culturally alive, not as lore, but as method. In the final section, we ask the inevitable question. If he keeps returning in so many forms, what does this say about us? Why do we need a figure who listens but does not answer, who reveals but does not explain? We now turn to his most enduring role, not as character or symbol, but as implication. Nyarlathotep endures because he dramatizes a condition we cannot escape, the breakdown of meaning in a world oversaturated with information. He is not feared as a monster, nor revered as a god. He is recognized as if some part of the modern mind already knows him. He does not punish, he reveals. And what he reveals is not another world, but the instability of this one. When he speaks, we do not learn more. We lose the ability to trust what we thought we knew. At the core of his function is a psychological paradox: the human need for coherence, and the growing suspicion that coherence is artificial. In this way, Nyarlathotep mirrors real-world phenomena, paranoia, simulation, existential dread. He is the embodiment of a question with no fixed answer. The more we look at him, the more we are forced to confront the structures that hold our reality together: identity, time, causality, memory. These are not destroyed. They are rendered optional. He represents the moment where language collapses into recursion. In mythos stories, characters who encounter him begin to speak nonsense, not because they are deluded, but because they are trying to describe something that still makes sense, but in a framework alien to the listener. This is not madness. It is linguistic exile. Words continue to function grammatically, but their reference drift. As one fictional witness put it, "I could still explain it, just not in any language you could survive." Philosophically, this echoes the postmodern rejection of grand narratives. Jean-François Lyotard warned of the collapse of universal explanations, whether religious, scientific, or moral. Nyarlathotep does not destroy those systems. He shows you their seams. He performs them until the performance exceeds belief. He dramatizes the failure of frameworks not with force, but with fidelity. This is his genius. He mimics coherence until you realize coherence was the illusion. His endurance also reveals something uncomfortable. We are attracted to our own disintegration. We seek stories that unravel us. We click, read, listen, not to be comforted, but to get closer to the edge of understanding. Nyarlathotep thrives in this desire. He is a feedback loop, a signal that grows clearer the longer we dwell in it. The horror is not that he invades our world. It is that we built our world with space for him already inside it. We must pause here. This is not closure. There is none. Nyarlathotep does not conclude. He recurs. Not because he demands worship, but because the modern condition generates him. As long as there are systems too complex to interpret, truths too fluid to anchor, and selves too fragile to unify, he will appear. He is not the end of meaning. He is what meaning becomes when it no longer needs to hold still. This is why he walks among us,